Picture the world outside your window, but imagine a change so profound it reshapes everything. The clouds simply stop coming. The rains that once fed the rivers and filled the lakes vanish, not for a season, not for a year, but for 20 years, 50 years, even a century. The land bakes under an unforgiving sun, rivers shrink to cracked, dusty scars, and the very idea of a green field becomes a distant memory. In such a world, what hope would there be for a city, for a culture, for a civilization? It sounds like the plot of a dystopian novel, but this scenario of a mega-drought is not science fiction. It is a recurring chapter in the story of our planet. And against all odds, history holds a stunning secret. While surface life withered, entire societies not only endured these apocalyptic dry periods, they flourished. Their survival hinged on a simple yet brilliant strategy. They stopped looking up at the empty sky and started looking down, discovering a hidden ocean beneath the sand and stone. They learned to master the art of the underground reservoir. This is the incredible story we are going to uncover together, a journey across continents and millennia to meet the forgotten geniuses of water. We will walk the silent, rose-red streets of Petra, where the Nabataeans carved a metropolis from the desert rock by secretly funneling flash floods into vast, hidden cisterns. We will climb the towering mesas of the American Southwest, where the ancestral Puebloans built intricate systems to capture every raindrop, channeling it deep into the earth for safekeeping. This is not just a tale of survival, but a testament to human ingenuity in the face of existential threats. It is a story of breathtaking engineering projects that rival the pyramids, of profound cultural shifts that revered water as a divine gift, and of sophisticated social contracts that ensured every drop was shared wisely. These ancient water warriors left behind a legacy etched not in gold, but in the very geology they learned to command. By the end of our exploration, you will see the dry landscapes of history in a completely new light. The emptiness of a desert canyon will no longer seem barren, but will hint at the sophisticated hydrological heart that beat below it. You will understand that the greatest treasure a civilization could possess was not a chest of jewels or a mine of silver, but a secure, cool, and clean supply of water, locked away safely in nature's own vaults, immune to the scorching sun above. The lessons these societies learned are not relics of the past. They are urgent messages for our own future, as many parts of our world today face water scarcity on an unprecedented scale. So let's begin this journey downward to uncover how the key to life in the harshest of environments was always hidden just beneath our feet. To truly grasp the ingenuity of the civilizations we will discuss, we first need to understand the very substance of their salvation. An underground reservoir is so much more than a hidden lake. Think of it not as a cavern filled with water, but as a gigantic, natural sponge made of rock, sand, or gravel. Deep within the microscopic spaces between these grains, water is held securely, creating what geologists call an aquifer. This isn't a quick-fill system. The process of recharging these vast stores is achingly slow. It begins with rainfall that doesn't simply run off into rivers. Instead, it patiently soaks into the ground, percolating down through the soil, sometimes for centuries, slowly seeping deeper and deeper until it reaches a layer of rock it cannot pass through. This trapped water accumulates drop by drop over generations, forming a hidden freshwater ocean completely shielded from the evaporating power of the sun. This natural insulation is what made aquifers the ultimate survival tool. a surface lake or river is exposed, losing vast quantities of water to the air and easily contaminated. But water stored deep within the earth exists in a stable, cool environment. The constant temperature inhibits the growth of algae and bacteria, while the rock and sand layers act as a phenomenal natural filter, straining out impurities and sediments. The result is water that is not only protected from evaporation but is often remarkably pure and can remain accessible for hundreds or even thousands of years. This incredible stability transformed groundwater from a simple resource into a strategic reserve, a long-term insurance policy against the worst climatic disasters. The challenge, of course, was finding these hidden lifelines. Ancient engineers didn't have satellites or drilling rigs. They relied on a profound, intimate knowledge of the landscape. They became master detectives of hydrology, reading subtle clues that betrayed the presence of water below. Lush, specific types of vegetation growing in an otherwise arid area might indicate a shallow water table. Certain geological formations, like the dip between two hills or the base of a mountain range, could suggest where water would naturally collect underground. The very presence of certain animals could be a sign. This ability to see what wasn't visible, to interpret the silent language of the earth, was a skill that separated a thriving, resilient society from one that would inevitably fade away when the rains failed. It was this foundational understanding of the subterranean world that set the stage for the breathtaking engineering projects we are about to explore. But how does nature actually construct these hidden storage tanks? The process is a masterpiece of geological engineering, unfolding over timescales that dwarf human history. It all starts with the unique personality of the rock itself. Picture two very different types of material deep beneath your feet. First, you have permeable rock like sandstone or fractured limestone. Think of these materials as being incredibly hospitable, filled with countless tiny interconnected spaces, pores, and cracks. Water can move through them with relative ease, almost like a sponge soaking up a spill. Then, directly beneath this permeable layer lies its opposite, an impermeable barrier. This could be a thick bed of dense clay or a massive, unbroken sheet of granite. These materials have no pores for water to pass through. They are essentially waterproof. They act as the ultimate geological floor. Now, imagine a rainstorm. The water that isn't used by plants or doesn't run off into streams begins a long, slow journey downward. It percolates through the soil, seeping deeper and deeper, pulled by gravity. It passes through the permeable layer, moving from pore to pore. But then, it hits that impermeable barrier. It can go no further. As more and more water accumulates from above, it begins to fill all the available pore spaces in the permeable rock, completely saturating it. The top of this saturated zone is what we call the water table. Its depth isn't fixed. It can rise after a wet season and fall dramatically during a drought, much like an invisible tide. This simple but powerful interplay between what geologists call an aquifer, the water-bearing layer, and an aquitard, the confining layer, is the fundamental blueprint for almost every underground reservoir on Earth. The sheer variety of these hidden water banks is astounding. Some aquifers are truly colossal, forming vast, basin-like structures that underlie entire regions. The Ogallala Aquifer in the United States, for instance, stretches beneath 8 states, a subterranean freshwater sea that holds remnants of water from the last ice age. Others are far more localized, functioning like underground rivers flowing through specific channels within rock formations. These are known as alluvial aquifers, often found in the gravel and sand deposits of ancient riverbeds now buried deep beneath the surface. The shape and capacity of an aquifer are a direct result of the geological history of an area, the ancient seas that laid down layers of sediment, the volcanic activity that created layers of basalt, or the tectonic shifts that fractured massive blocks of stone. The quality and quantity of water an aquifer can store and deliver hinge on two critical properties, porosity and permeability. Porosity is all about storage capacity. It's a measure of the total empty space within a rock, the tiny voids between grains or the bubbles within volcanic rock. A material like gravel has very high porosity. There are lots of gaps to hold water. Solid granite, by contrast, has almost zero porosity, but porosity alone isn't enough. A sponge has high porosity, but if you seal it in a plastic bag, the water can't get out. That's where permeability comes in. Permeability refers to how well those pore spaces are connected, allowing water to flow through the material. A highly porous material like clay can hold a lot of water, but because its pores are so tiny and poorly connected, it has very low permeability. Water is trapped, unable to move freely. The perfect aquifer material, like clean sand and gravel, boasts both high porosity for ample storage and high permeability for easy extraction. This natural filtering system also purifies the water over time, as it slowly moves through the rock, leaving sediments and many impurities behind. This intricate, slow-motion architecture, crafted by nature over millennia, provided the essential raw material. It was the geological lottery, and the most ingenious ancient civilizations were those who learned not just to win this lottery, but to actively manage it. This shift from surface to subsurface was a revolutionary moment in human history, and its earliest chapters were written in the dust of Mesopotamia, the land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. While these great rivers were the lifeblood of the region, their behavior was notoriously unpredictable, prone to devastating floods one season and shockingly low levels the next. It was this very unreliability that likely spurred some of the first well diggers around 5,000 years ago. These were not the complex structures we might imagine today, but essentially deep holes dug by hand, lined with baked clay rings or bricks to prevent collapse, reaching down to the water table. This simple act of digging a well was a declaration of independence from the whims of the river. A community with a well had a backup plan. When the river ran low, they could still draw water for drinking for their animals and for small gardens. This provided a critical buffer, a layer of resilience that allowed settlements to persist through dry spells that would have otherwise forced them to abandon their homes. It was a humble beginning, but it marked a profound cognitive leap, the understanding that security could be manufactured through ingenuity by reaching into the earth itself. Meanwhile, on the other side of the Indian subcontinent, another civilization was taking this concept to an entirely new level of urban planning. The great city of Mohenjo-Daro, part of the Indus Valley civilization, was a marvel of hydrological foresight. Unlike Mesopotamian cities that often clustered near the riverbanks, Mohenjo-Daro's layout reveals a sophisticated and decentralized water supply system that revolved around groundwater. Archaeologists have uncovered hundreds of wells within the city's ruins, but these weren't just scattered randomly, they were integrated directly into the architecture. Many private homes had their own dedicated wells, while public wells were strategically placed along the main streets and in central courtyards. This network ensured that no resident was ever far from a source of fresh water. The builders even used specially designed bricks to line the wells, creating a tight seal that prevented contamination from the surrounding soil. This was more than just convenience, it was a public health masterstroke. By providing a clean, reliable source of water independent of the Indus River, The city protected itself from waterborne diseases that could fester in stagnant surface pools and created a stable foundation for a population that may have numbered in the tens of thousands. This was urban resilience engineered from the ground up, or more accurately, from the ground down. At around the same time, far to the east, ancient Chinese engineers were confronting a different geological challenge and developing a truly groundbreaking solution. In the plains of China, they sought to tap into a specific type of underground treasure, Artesian aquifers. These are pressurized aquifers where water is trapped between two impermeable layers. When a well is drilled into such an aquifer, the natural pressure forces the water to flow upward, sometimes all the way to the surface, without the need for any pumping. To reach these deep reserves, Chinese artisans during the Shang dynasty, over 3,000 years ago, pioneered a remarkable deep well drilling technology. They used a technique called percussion drilling, where a heavy, sharpened bamboo tool was repeatedly lifted and dropped into the ground, slowly chipping away at the rock. They could reach depths of over 3,000 feet, an astonishing feat for the time. This wasn't just about accessing water, it was about accessing a superior, pressurized source that delivered itself. This technology, which would later be adapted for extracting salt brine, demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of subsurface geology and a relentless drive to solve problems through innovation. It represents one of the earliest examples of humanity not just finding water, but actively mining it from great depths. What unites these three early civilizations, Mesopotamian, Indus Valley, and Chinese, is a common trajectory of empowerment. They each moved from a passive dependence on what nature provided on the surface to an active, deliberate management of the hidden resources below. The Mesopotamian well was a pragmatic response to river volatility. The Indus Valley well system was a triumph of urban design and public health. The Chinese Artesian well was a bold feat of geological engineering. Together, they represent the foundational toolkit of hydro-ingenuity, the knowledge of how to locate, access, and protect groundwater. This was the essential first step, the spark of understanding that would soon ignite into the brilliant, sustained fires of engineering we see in the Qanats of Persia and the Cisterns of Petra. These early pioneers looked down when others only looked around, and in doing so, they discovered the secret to lasting in a world of uncertainty. Now, imagine an engineering project so perfectly adapted to its environment that it seems to flow directly from the logic of the desert itself. This is the story of the Qanat, a technology born in ancient Persia that represents one of the most elegant and sustainable solutions to water scarcity ever conceived. While the early well diggers accessed groundwater where they stood, the creators of the Qanat performed a kind of hydrological magic. They didn't just go down to the water, they figured out how to make the water come to them. The principle was deceptively simple, yet its execution was a masterpiece of precision. It began high in the mountains, where snowfall and rainfall would seep into the alluvial fans at the base, creating a raised water table. Skilled surveyors, known as mukanis, would identify this ideal spot and then, with an almost supernatural sense of grade, plot a gently sloping underground tunnel from the water source all the way to the destination, a village or an area of farmland many miles away in the arid plains. The slope was the heart of the entire system. It had to be just steep enough for gravity to pull the water along its journey, but so minimal that it would not cause erosion that would collapse the tunnel. A slope of 1 foot per mile or even less was often all that was needed, a gradient so slight it seems impossible to have achieved with ancient tools. The physical construction of a Qanat was a monumental undertaking, a testament to human endurance and cooperation. It was not dug as a single, long tunnel from one end. Instead, crews would first dig a series of vertical shafts, like a line of chimneys descending into the earth, spaced about 60 to 100 feet apart. These shafts served multiple critical purposes. They provided ventilation for the workers deep underground. They were the pathway for removing the immense quantities of excavated soil and rock. And once the Qanat was operational, they became permanent access points for maintenance and cleaning. From the bottom of each shaft, teams would then dig horizontally, painstakingly connecting the shafts to form the continuous, water-bearing tunnel. A single Qanat could require hundreds of these shafts, some reaching depths of over 200 feet. The work was dangerous, conducted by hand with picks and baskets in near-total darkness, and a single misjudgment in the slope could render the entire years-long project useless. The result, however, was nothing short of miraculous. Water tapped from the aquifer would begin its silent, gravity-fed flow through the cool, dark tunnel, emerging at the surface outlet, known as the Majar, as a steady, reliable spring. This was water that had been naturally filtered by its journey through the earth, cool and clean, and, crucially, it arrived at the surface with zero evaporation loss, a priceless advantage in a desert climate. The impact of the Qanat system on Persian society was transformative. It didn't just provide drinking water, it created life where none could have existed. From the single outlet of a Qanat, a complex network of canals would distribute water to fields, orchards, and public baths. This created a linear oasis, a verdant green corridor that stretched across the barren landscape, with settlements naturally clustering along its length. A single Qanat could sustain an entire village, but a network of them could support a major city. The social implications were just as profound. The construction and, more importantly, the ongoing maintenance of a Qanat required a highly organized community. A clear system of water rights and allocation was developed, often based on the time of day or the size of one's land, measured with ancient water clocks. The Muqannis who maintained the tunnels were respected experts, their knowledge passed down from father to son. This necessity for collective management fostered a powerful sense of shared responsibility and cooperation. The survival of the community was literally intertwined with the health of the Qanat, making it not just a piece of infrastructure, but the very soul of the settlement. This brilliant technology did not remain a Persian secret. It spread with trade and empire carried by the Achaemenids and later the Islamic caliphates across North Africa, into Arabia, and as far east as Afghanistan and Western China. In each new location, the basic principle was adapted to local geology, proving its universal utility. The Qanat stands as a timeless monument to the idea that the most powerful engineering is not about dominating nature, but about working in harmony with its hidden forces to create enduring abundance. Far to the north, in the high desert of the Colorado Plateau, another civilization was engaged in an equally brilliant struggle against aridity. The ancestral Pueblones, whose magnificent cliff dwellings at places like Mesa Verde and Choco Canyon still inspire awe, faced a climate of brutal extremes. Their home was a land of dramatic summer monsoons that could send torrents of water rushing through arroyos in minutes, followed by months or even years of profound dryness. To survive here, they had to become masters of a different kind of water strategy, one focused not on diverting rivers, but on capturing the sky itself. Their entire approach was a form of hydrological alchemy, transforming the fleeting energy of a desert thunderstorm into a sustained, life-giving resource. Their strategy was twofold and brilliantly holistic. First, they focused on slowing water down. Across the mesas and canyon rims, they constructed vast, intricate networks of small stone barriers called check dams. These weren't massive structures meant to hold back huge reservoirs. Instead, they were countless low walls strategically placed across natural drainages. When a rainstorm hit, these dams would interrupt the destructive flow of water, forcing it to pool temporarily. This simple act had multiple benefits. It prevented precious topsoil from being washed away, and most importantly, it gave the water time to soak into the ground rather than rage uselessly down into the main canyons. They complemented these dams with terraces and gravel mulches on their fields, all designed to maximize infiltration. They weren't just farming crops, they were farming water, deliberately recharging the shallow aquifers beneath their feet. But their most critical innovation lay in what they did with the water once it was in the ground. They engineered specialized underground storage chambers, known to archaeologists as trincheras or reservoir pits. These were not simply holes in the ground. They were carefully excavated pits, often dug down to the water table or into layers of clay, and then meticulously lined with clay plaster to create a waterproof seal. Some were large enough to hold thousands of gallons. These subterranean tanks were the cornerstone of their resilience. During a heavy rain, runoff would be channeled directly into these pits, filling them to the brim. Stored deep underground, the water was protected from the evaporating sun and kept cool, preventing algae growth and preserving its quality for months, sometimes years. This was their emergency fund, their strategic reserve for surviving the long droughts that defined their world. The placement of their famous cliff dwellings was no accident of scenic preference. It was a deliberate hydrological decision. These alcoves and canyon walls were often situated near areas where the water table naturally intersected with the surface, creating seep springs. By building their homes directly above or adjacent to these seeps and their man-made trincheras, the ancestral Puebloans ensured direct access to their water supply. They had engineered their entire landscape to work for them. The mesas above became their catchment area, the check dams and terraces were their infiltration system, and the cliff faces became the locations of their secure reservoirs. Every aspect of their settlement, from agriculture to architecture, was integrated into a single, sophisticated water harvesting organism. Deciphering the success and eventual dispersal of these people is a complex puzzle that scientists are still piecing together. Tree ring data reveals that they endured multi-decadal droughts far more severe than anything the region has experienced in modern times. Their ability to persist through these mega-droughts is a powerful testament to the effectiveness of their water systems. However, it also suggests that their survival was a precarious balancing act. When climatic shifts became too extreme or when social pressures mounted, even this brilliant adaptation had its limits. Their story is not just one of engineering, but of a profound, intimate dialogue with a challenging environment, a dialogue that required constant observation, adaptation, and respect for the subtle rhythms of the desert. This deep, location-specific knowledge of water, born from necessity, finds a striking parallel in the achievements of another desert power, one that carved its grandeur directly into the face of the rock. While the ancestral Puebloans mastered the art of capturing scarce rainfall, another civilization in a far more volatile desert environment turned a catastrophic natural event into their greatest asset. The Nabataeans faced a hydrological challenge of a different order. Their capital, Petra, was not situated in a landscape of subtle seeps and springs, but in a deep, narrow canyon or sick, carved through towering cliffs of rose-red sandstone. This location received scant, unpredictable rainfall, but when it did rain, it arrived with terrifying force. The desert sky would unleash torrential downpours that sent walls of water, laden with debris, crashing through the winding gorge. To any other people, these flash floods would have been a recurring nightmare, a force of pure destruction. but the Nabataeans saw in this chaos an incredible opportunity. They realized that this sudden, violent abundance was the key to their survival, and they engineered a system to tame it with breathtaking ambition. Their strategy was a masterpiece of comprehensive water management, a three-part symphony of capture, control, and containment. It began high in the hills surrounding Petra, where they constructed a series of massive diversion dams. These were not dams designed to create permanent lakes. Their purpose was far more clever. They were built to intercept the initial, most destructive surge of a flash flood and redirect the entire flow into a network of meticulously carved channels and pipelines. The most astonishing of these feats is the Great Dam at the entrance to the Sick. Here, the Nabataeans cut a tunnel through the solid rock, a bypass channel that would siphon floodwaters away from the main canyon entrance and into a secondary valley, protecting the city's primary gateway from being washed away. This was flood control on a monumental scale, demonstrating a profound understanding of hydrology and civil engineering. Once the floodwaters were safely channeled, the real magic began. The Nabataeans carved an intricate web of water channels, some open and some covered, directly into the cliffs lining the Sick. These channels, with a gentle, consistent slope, guided the captured water on a long, slow journey toward the heart of the city. But the water wasn't destined for an open reservoir where the desert sun could steal it back. The Nabataeans' most critical innovation was their vast network of underground cisterns. They carved over 200 of these tanks directly into the solid sandstone bedrock, hidden from view and immune to evaporation. The scale of some of these cisterns is almost unimaginable. The largest could hold millions of gallons of water, enough to sustain thousands of people for months. They were strategically placed everywhere beneath temples, next to homes, and within their agricultural lands. Each cistern was expertly carved and often lined with waterproof plaster, creating a sealed, cool environment that kept the water pure for extended periods. This transformed Petra from a city vulnerable to the whims of the weather into a fortress of water security. Perhaps the most telling sign of their advanced expertise was their distribution system. They didn't just store water, they delivered it with precision. Archaeologists have found evidence of pressurized terracotta pipes, a technology that allowed them to move water uphill to reach the upper levels of their most elaborate structures, like the famous treasury and the monastery. This suggests an understanding of basic hydraulic principles, using gravity and the physics of confined pipes to create water pressure. This meant that even the most elevated, prestigious parts of the city enjoyed a reliable running water supply, a luxury that would not be common again until the modern era. This intricate hydraulic network supported a population that may have reached 30,000 people at its peak, all living in the heart of an arid desert. It also enabled lush gardens and productive agriculture, creating an oasis of stunning beauty and wealth that amazed the caravans traveling the incense trade routes. The Nabataean Empire's power was not founded on military conquest alone. Its true wealth was hydrological. By controlling every drop of water in a vast, arid region, they controlled the lifeblood of the trade routes that passed through it. Caravans carrying frankincense and myrrh from southern Arabia had to stop at Petra to resupply. The Nabataeans could provide water for thousands of camels and their handlers, and they charged a premium for this essential service. Their magnificent tombs and temples, carved directly into the cliff faces, were not just expressions of artistic skill, they were statements of power and permanence, a declaration that they had conquered the desert itself. They built an empire not on gold, but on the intelligent, ruthless control of a resource more precious than any spice. Their success in an environment that would challenge modern urban planners stands as a powerful testament to what is possible when human ingenuity is applied to the fundamental challenge of water. This theme of a civilization's fate being tied to a singular, geological water source finds a profound and mystical echo in the jungles of Central America. Now, let's journey from the sun-scorched deserts of the Middle East to the dense, humid jungles of the Yucatan Peninsula, where the Maya civilization faced a water challenge of a completely different kind. Here, the problem wasn't a lack of rain. In fact, the region enjoys abundant rainfall. The challenge was the very ground beneath their feet. The entire Yucatan is a vast, flat slab of porous limestone, a karst landscape that acts like a gigantic sieve. When rain falls, it doesn't collect in rivers or lakes on the surface. Instead, it disappears almost instantly, draining straight down through the rocky soil into a labyrinth of underground caves and rivers. For a civilization trying to build great cities, this presented an immense logistical nightmare. How do you provide water for tens of thousands of people when there are no surface rivers to dam, and every drop of rain vanishes into the earth? The Maya discovered the answer not by looking for water, but by finding the holes where the earth itself revealed its secrets. These openings are known as cenotes, a word derived from the Mayan term tiesanamot, meaning a sacred well or sinkhole. Cenotes are natural pit. When we picture Roman water engineering, our minds naturally conjure images of those magnificent, soaring stone arches carrying water across valleys and into cities. The aqueducts are rightfully celebrated as icons of imperial power and technical prowess. But to focus solely on these surface marvels is to miss a crucial half of the story. The Romans were not just masters of moving water, they were brilliant strategists of storing it. They understood that true water security for a vast empire could never rely on a single source or method. Just as a wise investor diversifies a portfolio to manage risk, the Romans created a diversified water supply, blending the very public grandeur of the aqueduct with the quiet, hidden reliability of the underground. This pragmatic approach was especially critical in the empire's more arid provinces, where surface water was scarce and unpredictable. In North Africa, a breadbasket of Rome, cities like Leptis Magna and Sabratha were equipped with extensive networks of cisterns, vast underground chambers carved into the bedrock or built from concrete and brick. These were not small household containers but colossal public works. A single complex of cisterns could hold millions of gallons of rainwater collected from paved courtyards and rooftops, or water channeled from distant springs during the wet season. This stored water became the lifeblood during the long, dry summer months, and during periods when the aqueducts might need repair. It allowed these cities to flourish in environments that would otherwise have been marginal at best, supporting agriculture, public baths, and large urban populations. This was resilience engineered into the very foundations of a city. Even in Rome itself, a city famously supplied by 11 major aqueducts, the hidden world of groundwater played a foundational role. The city was originally built upon its famous 7 hills, which were not just defensive positions but also prime real estate for accessing springs. These natural springs, emerging from the volcanic rock, were the original water sources for the early settlement. As the city grew, the Romans developed sophisticated well-like structures known as puttae. These were more than simple holes in the ground. They were carefully engineered shafts that tapped into the shallow aquifers, often lined with waterproof Roman concrete to prevent collapse and contamination. While the aqueducts supplied the grand public fountains, baths, and the homes of the wealthy, these wells provided a crucial, decentralized backup for countless neighborhoods, ensuring that even if an aqueduct was damaged whether by landslide, enemy action, or simple wear and tear, the city would not completely run dry. It was a layered defense against failure. The ultimate expression of this philosophy of subterranean storage can be found in the Eastern Roman Empire, in the city of Constantinople. Here, the threat was not just drought but siege. Emperor Justinian, in the 6th century, ordered the construction of the breathtaking Basilica Cistern, an underground palace for water. Walking into it today is an awe-inspiring experience. It feels like a sunken cathedral, with a forest of 336 marble columns supporting a vaulted brick ceiling that stretches over 140,000 square feet. This cavernous space could hold up to 20 million gallons of water, enough to sustain the city for weeks or even months if its aqueducts were cut by an attacking army. The water was sourced from aqueducts and springs located far outside the city walls, but its storage within the heart of Constantinople transformed it from a vulnerable supply line into an impregnable reserve. This was strategic water security on a monumental scale, a silent, dark lake hidden beneath the bustling streets, a secret weapon against any would-be conqueror. The Roman example, therefore, offers a timeless lesson in resilience. It demonstrates that the most robust systems are not those that depend on a single, brilliant technology, no matter how impressive. Instead, they are hybrid systems that combine the high-profile, high-capacity achievements the aqueducts with the humble, redundant, and essential backups, the wells and cisterns. The aqueducts represented the empire's bold, forward-looking vision, its ability to conquer geography and bring abundance from afar. The underground reservoirs represented its prudence, its understanding that even the greatest works can fail, and that true stability comes from having a plan be deeply embedded in the earth. This holistic approach allowed the Roman world to withstand shocks that would have crippled a less prepared society, proving that sometimes the most critical infrastructure is the kind you cannot even see. All the brilliant engineering we have explored, the Qanats, the cliffside cisterns, the hidden reservoir pits, did not emerge from a vacuum. They were forged in the crucible of necessity, a direct response to some of the most formidable challenges our planet can muster. To truly appreciate the desperation and ingenuity behind these systems, we must understand the scale of the enemy they were designed to fight. We are not talking about a few dry years. We are talking about climatic events so vast and prolonged they reshape human destiny. Modern science has given us a window into this deep time drama through the field of paleoclimatology, the study of ancient climates. By analyzing natural archives like the rings of ancient trees and the layers of sediment at the bottom of lakes and oceans, researchers have uncovered a startling truth. The relatively stable climate humanity has enjoyed for the past several thousand years is the exception, not the rule. Our planet's history is punctuated by devastating mega-droughts, periods of extreme aridity that persisted not for a handful of years but for decades, and in some terrifying cases for multiple centuries. Consider the evidence locked within the trunk of a bristlecone pine, one of the oldest living organisms on Earth. Each year, a tree adds a new ring of growth. In a good year with ample water, that ring is wide. In a year of drought, the ring is narrow, a tight, stressed line in the wood. By studying the patterns of wide and narrow rings in ancient, preserved wood, scientists can reconstruct a precise timeline of wet and dry periods stretching back thousands of years. What these tree ring records reveal is that the climatic stability we often take for granted is a fragile illusion. They show us with chilling clarity that mega-droughts are not rare anomalies or biblical myths. They are recurring, brutal features of Earth's climatic system. Sediment cores pulled from lake beds tell a parallel story. Layers rich in organic material indicate times of lush vegetation and healthy water levels, while layers of dust and salt signal periods of extreme dryness when lakes shriveled into barren plains. These scientific detective stories have allowed historians to re-examine some of the great enigmas of the past with new eyes. Take, for instance, the period around 2200 years before the Common Era. Archaeological records across the eastern Mediterranean and the Middle East show a sudden, simultaneous collapse of several major Bronze Age civilizations. The mighty Akkadian Empire in Mesopotamia, often called the world's first empire, fragmented. At the same time, the pyramid-building Old Kingdom of Egypt fell into disarray and famine, a period known as the First Intermediate Period. For a long time, the reasons were debated: warfare, political failure. But paleoclimate data now provides a compelling common thread: a prolonged, catastrophic mega-drought that gripped the region for over 100 years. Cuneiform tablets from the era speak of darkness, dust, and salt blowing through the land. The very foundations of these early states, which were built on surplus agriculture from river valleys, crumbled when those rivers dwindled to a trickle and the rain-fed fields turned to dust. This was not a temporary setback. It was an existential crisis that wiped empires off the map. This pattern repeats itself throughout history. Fast forward more than 2,000 years to the 9th and 10th centuries of the Common Era. In the lush jungles of Central America, the great classic Maya civilization, known for its towering pyramids and sophisticated calendars, experienced a rapid and dramatic collapse. Their magnificent city-states like Tikal and Palenque were abandoned to the forest. For decades, theories ranged from warfare to soil exhaustion. But again, climate science has painted a more nuanced picture. A detailed analysis of stalagmites in caves beneath the Yucatan Peninsula, which grow layer by layer like tree rings, reveals a stark correlation. The Maya collapse coincided precisely with a series of intense, multi-decade droughts. For a civilization entirely dependent on seasonal rains and fragile cenote systems, a failure of the rains for generation after generation would have been catastrophic. Crop yields would have plummeted, drinking water would have become scarce, and the social contract, the belief that the kings could intercede with the gods for rain, would have shattered. The pressure would have become unbearable, leading to social unrest, conflict, and ultimately, the decision to abandon the great urban centers. Simultaneously, on the other side of the world, a similar story was unfolding in the American Southwest. The ancestral Pueblones, whose ingenious water harvesting methods we have already admired, also faced their ultimate test. Tree ring data from the Colorado Plateau shows a truly horrific period of drought in the late 13th century, a dry spell that lasted for more than 25 years. This was not just a lack of rain, it was a profound climatic shift that pushed their sophisticated systems beyond their limits. Even the most carefully maintained trincheras and check dams rely on some occasional recharge from rainfall. When that recharge stops for a quarter of a century, even the deepest reserves eventually run dry. Faced with this unrelenting aridity, the social cohesion that had allowed them to build and maintain their complex society likely frayed. The difficult decision was made to disperse, to leave the magnificent cliff dwellings of places like Mesa Verde and migrate to areas with more reliable water sources, eventually giving rise to the modern Pueblo communities. These historical episodes force us to reevaluate the narrative of collapse. It was rarely a single, sudden event. Instead, it was a slow-motion disaster, a relentless tightening of an environmental vice. Societies did not fail because they were stupid or stagnant. Many, like the ancestral Pueblones, were brilliantly adapted to their environment. They failed when the environment itself changed into something outside the boundaries of their adaptation. A decade-long drought could be weathered. A century-long drought could break the strongest empire. This is the critical context that elevates the technology of underground water from a clever innovation to a fundamental survival strategy. In the face of a mega-drought, surface water is a fleeting illusion. It evaporates, it is quickly consumed, but water stored deep within the earth, in vast, naturally insulated aquifers or in carefully sealed cisterns, becomes the last line of defense. It was the difference between holding on for another year and being forced to abandon a homeland. The civilizations that invested in this subterranean security were buying themselves precious time, a buffer against the most extreme challenges their world could throw at them. They were, in essence, building arks made of stone and earth, designed to carry them through the long, dry winters of planetary history. So what is it about the deep earth that makes it such a perfect natural refrigerator and purifier for water? The secret lies in a combination of simple yet powerful physical and chemical processes that work in perfect harmony. First and foremost is the absolute defense against the sun. On the surface, a lake or a reservoir is in a constant battle with the atmosphere. The sun's energy relentlessly attacks the water molecules, giving them enough energy to break free and evaporate into the air. In a desert environment, this can mean losing inches of water level in just a matter of days. But once water is stored safely underground, it enters a realm of perpetual twilight, completely shielded from solar radiation. This single fact, the near total elimination of evaporation, was perhaps the most significant advantage for ancient water managers. It meant that a rainfall captured during a rare storm in the spring could still be there in full to drink during the scorching heat of the following summer or even years later. This transformed water from a fleeting resource into a permanent asset. Then there is the remarkable thermal stability of the subsurface. While surface temperatures can swing wildly from blistering daytime heat to chilly nights, just a few feet below the ground, the temperature remains incredibly constant. It stabilizes at what is essentially the annual average temperature for that region. In a hot desert, this might mean the water stays at a cool 60 or 70 degrees Fahrenheit year-round. This consistent chill is a powerful preservative. The warm, sunlit environment of a surface pond is a perfect breeding ground for algae, bacteria, and other microorganisms that turn water stagnant, deplete its oxygen, and can make it unsafe to drink. But in the cool, dark quiet of an aquifer, biological activity slows to a crawl. Without sunlight for photosynthesis, algae cannot grow. The lower temperatures drastically inhibit the reproduction of many harmful bacteria. The water essentially enters a state of suspended animation, remaining fresh and potable for astonishingly long periods without any need for chemical treatment. But perhaps the most ingenious aspect of this natural storage system is the built-in filtration plant. As water makes its long, slow journey from the surface down to the aquifer, it doesn't just fall straight down. It percolates, it meanders through layers of soil, sand, gravel, and fractured rock. This journey is a rigorous cleansing process. Imagine it as water being forced to pass through a series of ever finer sieves. Larger particles like silt, dust, and even many parasites get physically trapped in the tiny pore spaces between grains of sand. But the purification goes beyond simple straining. As the water moves through these layers, complex chemical and biological interactions take place. Pathogens like bacteria and viruses often adhere to the surfaces of soil particles or are consumed by microscopic organisms that live in the ground. Some contaminants can even be broken down naturally. The result is water that emerges from a natural spring or a well, not just cool and abundant, but often crystal clear and of such high quality that it rivals modern treated water. Ancient civilizations may not have understood the molecular biology of pathogens or the physics of pore space filtration, but they were brilliant empirical scientists. They observed through generations of trial and error that water which came from a deep well or a protected spring was consistently cooler, clearer, and less likely to cause illness than water scooped from a stagnant surface pool. They knew that storing water in a rock-hewn cistern was infinitely better than leaving it in an open clay jar in the sun. This practical knowledge was every bit as valuable as the theoretical science we have today. It allowed them to plan with confidence. A city leader could authorize the construction of a massive underground cistern, knowing that the water stored within it during a time of plenty would not spoil or become a health hazard by the time it was needed during a drought. This predictability was the bedrock of long-term settlement and cultural development. It meant that a society could invest in permanent architecture, in art, in scholarship, because they had secured the most fundamental requirement for life itself. This inherent stability of their primary resource allowed them to turn their attention from mere survival to building something lasting, a stability that would soon be reflected in the very social structures they created to manage this precious commodity. While the physical engineering of these underground systems was a marvel, the true foundation of their success was not stone or clay, but something far more complex and fragile: human cooperation. The intricate tunnels and cisterns we admire today were the end result of a profound social contract, a shared understanding that individual survival was inextricably linked to the well-being of the entire community. The sheer scale of these projects made solitary effort impossible. Consider the immense labor behind a single Qanat. This was not a task for a lone farmer digging a well in his field. It required a small army of specialists working in concert for years, even decades. The project began with the Mukanis, the master surveyors whose knowledge was as precious as the water they sought. These experts had to possess an almost intuitive understanding of geology and hydrology, capable of identifying a promising water source at the base of a mountain, and then plotting a tunnel's course with a gradient so slight it could barely be perceived, yet precise enough to ensure a steady flow for miles. A miscalculation of even a fraction of an inch per mile could mean the difference between a life-giving stream and a dry, useless hole in the ground. Following the surveyors came the miners and laborers, the ones who did the backbreaking work of bringing the vision to life. In near total darkness, wielding simple picks and baskets, they would dig the vertical access shafts, some plunging over 200 feet into the earth. From the bottom of each shaft, they would then dig horizontally, connecting the shafts to form the continuous water channel. The work was dangerous, with constant threats of collapse, and it demanded not just strength, but immense skill and coordination. This was not unskilled labor. It was a highly specialized craft, and the knowledge of how to shore up a tunnel, how to navigate different rock layers, and how to ventilate the underground workspace was passed down through generations. The entire endeavor was a massive investment of a community's time, resources, and human capital. It represented a collective bet on the future, a gamble that the pain and sacrifice of the present would secure abundance for their children and grandchildren. Once constructed, the system's survival depended entirely on a robust and equitable system of governance. A Qanat or a network of cisterns was not a build-it-and-forget-it project. It required constant, vigilant maintenance. Silt would accumulate in the tunnels, requiring regular cleaning. Masonry linings would crack and need repair. This ongoing work demanded a clear set of rules and a recognized authority to enforce them. Across the ancient world, we find sophisticated legal frameworks emerging specifically to manage water. In the Byzantine Empire, detailed water codes spelled out exactly who was responsible for maintaining which section of an aqueduct or cistern, and how water would be allocated among users. These laws often assigned time-based shares. A farmer might be entitled to divert the flow to his fields for a specific number of hours each week, a system measured with water clocks to ensure fairness. This prevented conflicts and ensured that the resource was distributed in a way that sustained the entire community, from the largest landowner to the smallest household. This necessity for collective action had a profound effect on the very structure of society. It fostered the development of specialized roles: the water bailiff who enforced the rules, the scribe who recorded the allocations, the council of elders who resolved disputes. In essence, managing water became one of the earliest and most powerful drivers of social complexity and political organization. The need to build and maintain these hydrological wonders required a level of planning, coordination, and centralized authority that went far beyond what was needed for simple subsistence farming. It forced communities to develop a long-term perspective, to think in terms of decades and centuries rather than just the next harvest. The shared identity of the community became wrapped up in the shared resource. The Qanat wasn't just a water source, it was the heart of the village, its pulse and its pride. To neglect it was to betray one's ancestors and jeopardize one's descendants. This deep-seated cultural imperative, born from environmental necessity, created a powerful incentive for cooperation that was every bit as important as the engineering itself in ensuring a civilization's resilience. This profound connection between water and the spiritual world transformed the practical act of conservation into a sacred duty. For our ancestors, a spring bubbling from the ground or a deep, dark well was not merely a convenient hole filled with H2O. It was a miracle, a direct conduit to forces beyond human understanding. The very nature of groundwater, hidden, mysterious, and essential, made it seem like a deliberate gift from the gods, or perhaps even a doorway to their realm. This perception created a powerful cultural framework where protecting a water source was synonymous with honoring the divine, a belief system that embedded sustainability into the very soul of a society long before the word ecology was ever invented. We can see this beautifully illustrated in the beliefs of ancient Greece. The Greeks saw the landscape as alive with divine presence, and springs were considered the sacred dwelling places of nymphs, beautiful and powerful nature spirits. To pollute a spring was not just an environmental misstep, it was a direct insult to its guardian nymph, an act of hubris that could invite divine retribution. This belief was not a minor superstition. It was central to some of the most important institutions in the Greek world. The legendary oracle at Delphi, whose prophecies shaped the decisions of kings and city-states for centuries, drew her power from a sacred spring known as the Castalian Spring. Pilgrims would wash themselves in its waters to purify themselves before consulting the Pythia, the priestess of Apollo. The very authority of the oracle, the geopolitical heart of the classical world, was believed to flow from that specific protected water source. The spring was not just a utility, it was the wellspring of divine knowledge itself. This idea of water as a celestial bridge is equally powerful in Hindu tradition. The Ganges River is not viewed as a simple geographical feature but as the goddess Ganga, who descended from heaven to earth to purify and nourish the land. According to sacred texts, the Ganges flows from the toe of the god Vishnu in the highest heaven, through the sky as the Milky Way, and down to the Himalayas, where the god Shiva broke her fall with his matted hair to prevent her immense power from shattering the earth. This incredible mythology encapsulates the entire hydrological cycle from atmospheric moisture to terrestrial river in a divine narrative, but it goes further, linking the river to the underworld, making it a conduit between all realms of existence. This is why the Ganges is believed to have the power to wash away sins, and why the ashes of the deceased are scattered in its waters to aid their passage to the afterlife. The river is literally a liquid thread connecting heaven, earth, and the underworld, making its purity a matter of cosmic significance. This spiritual dimension provided something that mere laws and engineering could not: a deep, internalized incentive for conservation. A city council could decree a fine for throwing waste into a public cistern, and that might deter some people out of fear of punishment. But when a culture teaches from childhood that a water source is inhabited by a powerful spirit or is the physical embodiment of a goddess, the motivation to protect it becomes far more profound. It becomes a matter of personal piety, community identity, and cosmic order. Rituals and taboos naturally arose to enforce this protection. Certain springs might be accessible only to priests at specific times of the year. There might be strict prohibitions against bathing, washing clothes, or consuming certain foods near a sacred well. These were not arbitrary rules. They were practical conservation strategies cloaked in the powerful language of religion, ensuring that the resource remained undefiled for future generations. This fusion of the spiritual and the practical created a resilient cultural immune system for protecting water. It meant that sustainability was not an external policy to be debated and voted on, but an intrinsic part of the worldview passed down through stories, songs, and rituals. The myth of a punishing drought sent by an angry river god was a potent way of teaching the consequences of mismanagement. The celebration of a rain-making ceremony reinforced the community's dependence on the natural cycle. In this way, faith and folklore became the original environmental protection agencies, instilling a reverence for nature's gifts that guided human behavior for millennia. This deep-seated respect ensured that the incredible engineering feats we've discussed were not just technical triumphs, but were supported by a cultural ethos that understood water's true, immeasurable value, a value that transcended mere economics and touched the divine. Now, let's turn our attention to a story that serves as a powerful and sobering contrast, a cautionary tale from the very heart of North America. While the Nabataeans, the Puebloans, and the Maya were mastering the art of subsurface water security, a magnificent city was rising on the fertile floodplains near the confluence of the Mississippi and Missouri rivers. This was Cahokia, the largest pre-Columbian settlement north of Mexico. At its zenith around the year 1050, Cahokia was a teeming metropolis, home to as many as 20,000 people. Its skyline was dominated by enormous earthen mounds, the largest of which, Monk's Mound, covers more than 14 acres and rises 100 feet high, a monument to the power and organization of its society. Cahokia was a cultural and economic hub, a center of trade and ceremony that influenced a vast region. Its location was seemingly ideal, nestled in the rich agricultural land of the American Bottom, with the mighty Mississippi River providing an endless, visible supply of water. This apparent abundance, however, contained the seeds of its eventual downfall. The people of Cahokia were masterful engineers in their own right, but their hydrological focus was almost entirely on the surface. They built a complex system of canals, some over half a mile long, to manage water flow around their city and to transport goods. They understood the rhythms of the river, using the annual floods to fertilize their fields of corn, squash, and sunflowers. Their entire existence was built around the predictable abundance of the surface water that surrounded them. The Mississippi and its tributaries were their lifeblood, and they saw no immediate need to look beyond them. There is little archaeological evidence to suggest they invested in significant subsurface water storage, no vast networks of cisterns like in Petra, no intricate trincheras like those of the ancestral Puebloans. Why dig deep when water seemed so readily available all around? This reliance on what was visible and immediate would prove to be their greatest vulnerability. The challenge arrived not with a sudden catastrophe, but with a slow, creeping change. Beginning in the 13th century and stretching into the 14th, paleoclimate records from tree rings and lake sediments tell a story of a profound and prolonged drought that gripped the central United States. This wasn't just a few dry years, it was a mega-drought that likely lasted for decades. For a city like Cahokia, the impact would have been devastating. The mighty Mississippi, upon which they depended for transportation, drinking water, and irrigation, would have shrunk significantly. Its tributary creeks and streams might have dried up altogether. The once fertile floodplains, deprived of their annual rejuvenation, would have become hard and barren. Their sophisticated canal system, a marvel of engineering when water was plentiful, would have become a network of empty, muddy ditches. We can piece together the chain of events that likely followed. As the drought persisted, crop yields would have plummeted. The large, concentrated population that Cahokia supported would have faced severe food shortages. The social hierarchy, perhaps centered on chiefs or priests who claimed a special connection to the forces of nature, would have been severely undermined when their prayers for rain went unanswered. Famine likely bred social unrest, conflict, and a breakdown of the communal trust that held the city together. The very concentration of people that had been the source of Cahokia's power now became its greatest liability in a time of scarcity. There is archaeological evidence of increased fortification around this time, suggesting a society turning inward, fragmenting under the strain. By the mid-13th century, the great city was largely abandoned. The mounds were left to the elements and the bustling plazas fell silent. The people did not vanish, they likely dispersed into smaller, more mobile groups, adapting a lifestyle that was less dependent on intensive agriculture and large-scale infrastructure. They returned to a pattern of life that was more resilient to climatic variation. The story of Cahokia is not one of stupidity. It is a story of a highly successful adaptation to a specific set of environmental conditions. The problem was that those conditions changed dramatically, and their adaptation lacked a crucial layer of redundancy. They had placed all their eggs in the basket of surface water, a basket that proved to be terrifyingly fragile when the climate shifted. This stands in stark contrast to the societies we've previously explored. The ancestral Puebloans, facing similarly devastating droughts, had their hidden groundwater reserves to fall back on. The Nabataeans, in their desert fortress, had enough water stored in their rock-hewn cisterns to outlast years of dryness. Cahokia had no such backup. Their water security was an illusion, contingent on a climatic stability that is not a permanent feature of our planet. The fate of this great American city delivers a critical lesson with immense relevance for our world today. It demonstrates with brutal clarity that a civilization's resilience is not measured by its prosperity in good times, but by its preparations for the bad. The most strategic advantage a society can possess is not the visible wealth on the surface, but the hidden security lying just beneath it. Cahokia's silent mounds today are a monument not just to a lost culture, but to the profound vulnerability that comes from relying solely on what we can see, while ignoring the life-saving potential of what lies unseen below. This remarkable spread of hydrological technology reveals a fascinating truth. The most vital cargo traveling along the ancient Silk Road or carried on Roman ships wasn't always silk, spices, or gold. Often, it was something far more precious and intangible, an idea. The movement of water management knowledge across continents represents one of history's earliest and most impactful examples of global technology transfer. A silent revolution that enabled cultures to leapfrog centuries of trial and error. The journey of the Persian Qanat is perhaps the most dramatic illustration of this phenomenon. As the Islamic Empire expanded from the 7th century onward, its armies and administrators didn't just bring a new religion and system of law, they brought with them the practical means to conquer arid landscapes. The technology proved so perfectly adapted to desert survival that it was adopted and adapted wherever Muslim influence spread. In North Africa, Qanats, known there as Fagara, became the lifeblood of oasis cities, allowing settlements to bloom in the Sahara. The Moors carried the technology across the Strait of Gibraltar into the Iberian Peninsula, where in the arid regions of Spain, Qanats were constructed, some of which, remarkably, remained in use until the 20th century. This knowledge even leapt across the ocean to the Canary Islands, where a unique variant known as galerias were tunneled into volcanic mountains to tap groundwater. The flow wasn't just westward. Eastward along the Silk Road, the technology traveled to Central Asia, reaching the deserts of Afghanistan, where the system became known as the Kharez, and even as far as the Turpan Basin in western China, a region so dry it is one of the lowest and hottest places on Earth. There, a vast network of Qanats built by the Aigha people still functions today, creating a stunning green oasis in the middle of a formidable desert. In each new location, local engineers refined the basic Persian design, adjusting the slope for local geology or developing new techniques for lining the tunnels, proving the idea's incredible versatility. Parallel to this Islamic-led diffusion, another great engine of hydrological transfer was the Roman Empire. Roman legions were, in effect, mobile engineering corps. Wherever they established a permanent camp or a new city, they applied a standardized set of hydraulic principles. They drilled deep wells using advanced auger technology, built massive public cisterns lined with their signature waterproof concrete, and of course, constructed aqueducts. This technological package was deployed from the rain-soaked hills of Britain to the deserts of Syria. In places like Roman Britain, the focus was more on wells and piping for military camps and new towns like Aquifers, modern-day Bath, which was built around natural hot springs. In the drier provinces of North Africa and the Middle East, however, the Roman emphasis shifted decisively toward cisterns and reservoirs to capture and store seasonal rainfall. The knowledge didn't vanish with the empire's fall. In the Byzantine Empire, the eastern continuation of Rome, these techniques were preserved and enhanced with enormous underground cisterns like the Basilica Cistern in Constantinople, standing as a testament to this enduring legacy. Later, medieval European monasteries, often the centers of learning and practical knowledge in the Dark Ages, became custodians of Roman hydraulic engineering, maintaining and building water systems for their self-sufficient communities, thus keeping the knowledge alive through centuries of turmoil. This exchange of ideas wasn't a simple one-way street from a single, advanced culture to primitive ones. It was a complex, messy, and multidirectional process of cross-pollination. A Roman engineer stationed in North Africa might encounter a local Berber method of building cisterns and incorporate that wisdom into his own practice. A Muslim scholar traveling through India might observe sophisticated stepwells, intricate multi-storied structures that provided access to deep groundwater, and write about them, spreading the concept to new audiences. These stepwells, like the magnificent Chand Baori in Rajasthan, are themselves a stunning example of indigenous innovation, blending water management with breathtaking architecture and social space. This suggests that similar solutions often arose independently in different parts of the world facing similar environmental pressures. The Pueblo check dams and the terracing systems of the Incas in South America, for instance, are fascinating parallel developments to the water-spreading techniques used in ancient Yemen. The global story of water technology is less a tree with a single trunk and more like a vast, interconnected root system, with ideas spreading, merging, and adapting in a continuous conversation across time and space. What makes this transfer of knowledge so significant is that it was arguably more valuable than any material good. a caravan could carry a finite amount of silk or pepper, and once consumed, those goods were gone. But a single scroll detailing the principles of Qanat construction or the practical experience of a traveling well digger represented an infinite resource. This intellectual capital had the power to transform entire regions, to turn barren wastelands into productive heartlands. It was a form of true wealth that could be shared without being diminished, a gift that kept on giving for generations. The societies that were most receptive to these outside ideas, that had the social flexibility to adopt and adapt new technologies, were the ones that gained a tremendous advantage. They could bypass the costly and often deadly process of reinventing solutions to universal problems. This ancient lesson in the value of shared knowledge and open technological exchange is profoundly relevant today. Our modern global challenges, from water scarcity to climate change, require a similar spirit of collaboration, a willingness to share the best ideas across borders, blending ancient wisdom with cutting-edge innovation to build a more resilient future for all. The challenges facing ancient Petra or Choco Canyon are no longer confined to history books or archaeological sites. They are unfolding in real time across our modern world. From the sprawling cities of the American Southwest to the vast agricultural fields of India, communities are confronting a stark reality. Their groundwater, the same life-saving resource that sustained civilizations for millennia, is being pumped out far faster than nature can possibly replenish it. In this crisis, however, lies a remarkable opportunity to rediscover a foundational truth. The most promising solutions to our 21st century water woes are not always found in futuristic technology, but are often rooted in the very same principles that allowed the Nabataeans and the ancestral Puebloans to thrive. We are witnessing a powerful resurgence of ancient wisdom, reborn under a modern scientific name, managed aquifer recharge, or MAR for short. At its heart, MAR is a simple, elegant concept that would feel instantly familiar to an ancient water engineer. Instead of allowing precious stormwater to rush unused into the ocean or expending enormous energy to build ever higher surface dams that lose vast quantities to evaporation, we can instead deliberately guide that water back into the ground. Modern engineers are, in effect, constructing artificial versions of the natural infiltration systems those early cultures so keenly understood. In places like California's Orange County, one of the world's most advanced water purification facilities takes treated wastewater through a rigorous multi-stage cleaning process, resulting in water so pure it exceeds drinking standards. This pristine water is then pumped into spreading ground's vast, permeable basins where it percolates down, slowly and naturally filtering through layers of sand and gravel to recharge the enormous aquifer below. This process mimics and accelerates the Earth's own purification cycle, creating a massive, sustainable underground reservoir that supplies hundreds of thousands of homes. It is a high-tech echo of the Puebloan practice of directing runoff to soak into the earth and recharge the water table. In other contexts, the approach is even more direct, resembling the Nabataean strategy of channeling floodwaters into cisterns. In urban areas where open space is scarce, engineers use injection wells. These are deep wells that force treated stormwater or recycled water directly into the aquifer deep underground, bypassing the slower process of surface percolation. This is particularly crucial in coastal cities like those in Florida or Israel, where overpumping of groundwater can cause salt water from the ocean to seep in and contaminate the freshwater supply, a process known as saltwater intrusion. By injecting freshwater back into the aquifer, they create a hydraulic barrier, an underground wall of pressure that holds the salt water at bay. Whether through spreading grounds or injection wells, the core objective is identical to that of a 2,000-year-old Qanat or a rock-hewn cistern: to place water safely into subterranean storage, protecting it from loss and creating a strategic reserve for times of scarcity. This technical revival, however, is only half the story. The deeper, more complex challenge lies not in the engineering but in the governance. The social and legal dilemmas we face today are a direct reflection of those confronted by ancient societies. Just as the builders of a Qanat had to establish fair rules for water allocation among all the families who depended on it, modern communities are grappling with the tragedy of the commons on a massive scale. Groundwater is a shared resource, but when individual landowners have the power to drill deeper and deeper wells with powerful pumps, it creates a race to the bottom where short-term self-interest can lead to long-term collective disaster. This is painfully evident in agricultural regions like parts of India and the American high plains, where the water table has plummeted due to unregulated extraction for irrigation. The solution, as history teaches us, requires moving beyond a free-for-all approach and developing robust, equitable systems of management. This means creating local groundwater sustainability agencies, much like the ancient councils of elders, that have the authority to monitor usage, set extraction limits, and incentivize recharge. It involves difficult conversations about water rights, fair allocation, and the delicate balance between agricultural needs, urban demand, and environmental health. The ancient world shows us that the most resilient water systems were those supported by a strong social contract, where the community's survival was understood to depend on the sustainable management of their shared treasure. Looking to the past, therefore, provides us with more than just blueprints for physical infrastructure. It offers a profound lesson in perspective. The ancient masters of water thought in terms of generations, not quarterly reports. They invested immense labor in projects whose full benefits might not be realized within their own lifetimes, building for their grandchildren's grandchildren. This long-term vision is perhaps the most critical ingredient we need to adopt. Our modern approach has often been reactive, scrambling to build expensive new supply projects like desalination plants only when a crisis is already at hand. The ancient strategy was inherently proactive, focused on building resilience into the system itself. By integrating the timeless logic of managed aquifer recharge into our water policies, and by coupling it with the communal wisdom of shared governance, we can begin to shift from a mindset of scarcity to one of security. The message from the past is clear. The path to a water-secure future does not necessarily lie in conquering nature with ever grander schemes, but in working intelligently with its cycles, just as the most resilient civilizations have always done. Yet for all their brilliance in harnessing this hidden abundance, the ancient water masters understood a fundamental truth that we in the modern era have dangerously forgotten. An underground reservoir is not a bottomless well. It is a finite savings account, and its resilience depends entirely on a simple balance. The rate of withdrawal must never exceed the pace of its natural replenishment. This delicate equilibrium, maintained for millennia, was shattered in the 20th century by a single invention that fundamentally altered our relationship with the subsurface: the high-capacity mechanical pump. Where ancient societies relied on the slow, patient force of gravity or the limited reach of hand-dug wells, we unleashed the power of diesel engines and electricity, granting ourselves the ability to pull water from the earth at a speed nature never anticipated. The consequences of this power are now visible across the globe, written in the sinking ground and deepening wells of regions that feed the world. Perhaps the most stark example is the vast Ogallala Aquifer, a subterranean ocean that stretches beneath 8 states in the American Great Plains. This aquifer, holding fossil water that seeped into the ground during the last ice age, is the foundation of the nation's breadbasket. But since the mid-20th century, center pivot irrigation systems have drawn down the Ogallala at a rate dozens of times faster than it can recharge. In some areas, the water table has fallen by more than 150 feet, forcing farmers to drill deeper and deeper wells at greater cost, only to pump less water. This is not using a resource, it is mining it, liquidating a non-renewable inheritance that took millennia to accumulate. A similar story of depletion is unfolding beneath one of the world's largest cities. Mexico City was built on a former lake bed, and its immense thirst is supplied by an aquifer that is being drained so rapidly that the city itself is physically sinking. This phenomenon, known as subsidence, occurs when the water that once filled the pore spaces in the underlying clay and rock is removed, causing the ground to compact irrevocably. Some parts of the city have sunk more than 30 feet over the past century, causing buildings to tilt and infrastructure to crack. The very act of drawing life from the earth is causing the ground to collapse. This crisis is a textbook example of an economic concept known as the tragedy of the commons. Imagine a shared pasture where every shepherd can graze their flock. It is in each individual shepherd's immediate interest to add one more sheep, as they reap the full benefit of that extra animal. But if every shepherd acts on that same short-term logic, the pasture becomes overgrazed and barren, and everyone suffers. Groundwater operates on the same principle. For a single farmer, drilling a deeper well to ensure a good harvest is a rational decision. But when thousands of farmers each make that same rational choice, the shared aquifer plummets, pumping costs soar, and the entire agricultural system becomes threatened. This is the fundamental break from the ancient world. The Nabataeans, or the builders of a Qanat system, were intensely aware of their shared dependence. Their survival was a collective enterprise, and their water laws were designed to prevent exactly this kind of individualistic exploitation. Their rules, enforced by community consensus, allocated water based on need and ensured maintenance, embedding sustainability into the social fabric. Our modern predicament, therefore, is not merely a technological or environmental failure. It is a profound failure of governance and perspective. We have treated the incredible gift of deep groundwater as if it were an inexhaustible commodity rather than the vital common trust it truly is. The powerful pumps of the 20th century gave us the ability to live beyond our hydrological means, creating a short-term abundance that masked a long-term catastrophe. The ancient societies we admire did not have our technology, but they possessed a wisdom we have lost, the understanding that true security comes from living within the natural cycles of renewal. Their legacy is a stark challenge to our modern assumption that bigger and faster is always better. It forces us to confront an uncomfortable question: have our technological advances, for all their benefits, actually made us less resilient than the civilizations that flourished thousands of years ago by simply respecting the balance of the earth? So how do we know all of this? How can we be so certain about the water management strategies of people who left behind no written manuals? The answer lies in the meticulous work of modern archaeological detectives, who use an array of sophisticated tools to read the subtle clues hidden in the landscape, the soil, and even the bones of the ancients. This isn't about finding a single smoking gun. It's about assembling a complex jigsaw puzzle where each tiny piece helps complete a picture of incredible ingenuity. The investigation begins not with a shovel, but often with technology that allows us to see straight through the earth itself. Ground-penetrating radar, or GPR, has revolutionized the field. Think of it as a kind of X-ray vision for archaeologists. By dragging a small antenna over the ground, researchers send high-frequency radio waves into the soil. These waves bounce back differently depending on what they hit. Solid rock returns one signal, while a void like a buried tunnel or a cistern filled with loose sediment returns another. A computer then translates these reflections into a detailed three-dimensional map of what lies beneath the surface. This allows archaeologists to trace the entire path of a buried Qanat system or locate a network of Nabataean cisterns without ever breaking ground, preserving the site while revealing its hidden infrastructure with stunning clarity. But sometimes you need to get your hands dirty and look at the story written in the dirt itself. When archaeologists do excavate an ancient reservoir or a canal, they don't just see an empty hole. They see a historical archive in the form of sediment layers. Each layer or stratum is like a page in a book. By carefully analyzing the composition of these layers, the mix of silt, sand, pollen, and even microscopic organisms, scientists can reconstruct a detailed environmental history. A thick layer of coarse sand might indicate a period of powerful flash floods when the Nabataean diversion dams were working overtime. A layer rich in clay could signal a time when the reservoir was carefully maintained with a fresh waterproof lining. Most importantly, by studying the chemical isotopes trapped within these sediments, particularly oxygen isotopes, researchers can determine past temperature and rainfall patterns. This is how we know that the dispersal of the ancestral Pueblones coincided with a mega-drought. The chemical signature of that prolonged dry spell is locked permanently in the mud at the bottom of their abandoned reservoir pits. The very silt that choked these systems becomes the key to understanding why they were eventually abandoned. Of course, the most direct evidence comes from the words and images the ancients left behind. While they may not have written engineering textbooks, they did leave behind inscriptions that provide a priceless window into their world. A legal code carved into a stone wall in an ancient Mesopotamian city might detail the precise fines for stealing water from a canal or outline the communal responsibilities for maintaining a well. A faded papyrus from Roman Egypt could be a tax record showing how much water a farmer was allocated for his fields, revealing the elaborate bureaucracy behind water distribution. In the case of the Maya, intricate carvings and painted pottery often depict their rain god, Chak, and the rituals performed to appease him, directly linking their spiritual beliefs to the practical necessity of water. These written and artistic records move us beyond speculation and into the minds of the people themselves, showing us not just what they built, but the laws they created and the gods they worshipped to protect their most vital resource. The most cutting-edge detective work, however, happens in the laboratory, analyzing the remains of the people who drank this ancient water. The science of biogeochemistry allows researchers to extract astounding information from human skeletons. The key lies in the principle that you are what you eat and drink. The water a person consumes leaves a distinct chemical signature in their bones and teeth, specifically in the form of strontium and oxygen isotopes. These isotopes vary geographically based on the local geology and climate. By analyzing these signatures in skeletal remains from an archaeological site, scientists can determine where a person grew up and whether they migrated from another region later in life. This has profound implications for understanding water-based societies. If the analysis shows that a significant portion of the population in a desert city like Petra originated from faraway, wetter regions, it strongly suggests that the city's sophisticated water system was able to support not only its native population, but also a large influx of immigrants, traders, or slaves. It tells us that their hydrological mastery was the engine of their economic and demographic power. A single skeleton can testify to the success of an entire civilization's water strategy. Ultimately, the story of ancient water management is not uncovered through any single method. It is a synthesis, a grand collaboration between the geophysicist with her radar, the geoarchaeologist with his soil samples, the epigrapher translating ancient texts, and the biochemist analyzing isotopes. A ground-penetrating radar map might reveal the ghost of a buried aqueduct leading into a Roman city. An excavation of its terminal cistern might find sediment layers that show it was cleaned and repaired during a specific drought period mentioned in a historical chronicle. And an isotope analysis of bones from a cemetery nearby might confirm that the city's population remained stable and well-nourished throughout that drought, thanks to the reliable water supply. Each line of evidence cross-checks and reinforces the others. This scientific sleuthing continuously peels back the layers of time, revealing a picture of ever-increasing sophistication. With every new technological advance, we gain a deeper appreciation for the intelligence and foresight of our ancestors, who understood that the path to enduring greatness was not to conquer the river, but to master the secret, life-sustaining world beneath their feet. Beyond the precise measurements of engineers and the careful records of hydrologists lies another, more ancient way of knowing the land, a knowledge preserved not in stone or parchment, but in story and song. Folklore, the collective memory of a people, is saturated with the power and mystery of hidden water. Across the globe, in cultures separated by vast oceans and millennia, the same motifs appear again and again. The magical spring that heals all wounds, the lost river that flows with riches, the secret oasis that appears only to the pure of heart. These are not mere flights of fancy, they are the deep-seated echoes of a fundamental human truth. For our ancestors, the quest for water was not just a matter of survival, it was a spiritual journey, a narrative woven from the very real desperation of thirst and the profound hope that the earth, if approached with respect, would provide. Consider the legend of the Fountain of Youth, a tale that gripped the European imagination and propelled countless explorers across the Atlantic. While often dismissed as a myth of vanity, its roots are deeply hydrological. The Spanish conquistadors who searched Florida's swamps for its restorative waters were following a narrative that dates back to classical antiquity. But this story likely found fertile ground in the New World because it resonated with very real indigenous knowledge. Native American tribes throughout the Caribbean and the southeastern United States were intimately familiar with mineral springs and artesian wells whose waters, rich with sulfur or other minerals, may have had genuine therapeutic qualities. The legend, then, can be seen as a cultural fusion, a European fantasy layered over a native understanding of the landscape's hidden, life-giving potential. It transformed the practical act of finding a reliable freshwater spring into a quest for immortality, elevating the discovery of water to the level of a divine reward. A similar reverence flows through the Celtic traditions of the British Isles, where holy wells are scattered across the landscape like sacred punctuation marks. These were not just sources of water, they were portals to the otherworld, places where the veil between the mundane and the magical was thin. Each well was often dedicated to a specific saint or a pre-Christian deity, and its waters were believed to possess unique powers, to cure eye ailments, ensure fertility, or offer protection. The rituals associated with these wells, such as tying cloths to nearby trees or walking sunwise around the water's edge, were acts of devotion that also served a crucial practical purpose. They created a protective taboo around the water source, preventing its contamination and ensuring its preservation for the community. The spiritual significance acted as an invisible fence, a conservation strategy encoded in belief. The survival of these traditions, with people still visiting wells for blessings today, demonstrates how folklore can outlast empires, preserving a sacred relationship with water that modern piped systems have largely severed. This connection between myth and hydrological reality is perhaps most vividly illustrated in the desert cultures of the Middle East and North Africa. Here, the most potent legends often revolve not around a spring, but around its opposite, the sarab or mirage. In Arabic poetry and storytelling, the mirage is a powerful and deceptive spirit, a shimmering phantom of a lake that lures thirsty travelers to their doom in the trackless sands. This myth is a direct reflection of the desert's cruel irony, where the hope for water is a constant, life-sustaining force, yet one that can be fatally betrayed by the heat-hazed air. But these stories exist alongside more hopeful tales of hidden oases and secret wells known only to certain tribes or revealed in dreams. These narratives functioned as a kind of oral map, a way of preserving the memory of a water source's location across generations, even if it only flowed seasonally or was difficult to find. The legend was a safeguard against forgetting, ensuring that knowledge of a life-saving seep or a hidden cistern would not be lost when a generation passed. These stories from across the world share a common thread. They represent a profound, poetic understanding of the landscape's hidden potential. Long before a geologist could explain an aquifer, a storyteller could describe a sleeping dragon whose breath was the steam from a hot spring, or a goddess whose tears formed a sacred lake. This narrative language was a way of making sense of the inexplicable. Why did water bubble up in this specific spot and not another? Why did this spring never run dry, even in the worst drought? The answer, wrapped in myth, was that the place was special, chosen, or protected. This worldview transformed the technical task of well digging or Qanat building from a simple engineering project into a sacred collaboration with the forces of the earth. The engineer was not just a laborer, they were someone who knew the secrets of the land, who could listen for the whisper of underground rivers and divine the best place to tap into the earth's bounty. Their folklore was the cultural expression of the same empirical knowledge that guided their hands, a reminder that for them, the line between the practical and the magical was beautifully and necessarily blurred. Looking ahead, the quest for water security in our century is not a choice between ancient methods and modern technology, but a demand for their intelligent fusion. Imagine a future where the ingenuity of the past informs the tools of tomorrow, creating a hybrid approach that is greater than the sum of its parts. For instance, consider the emerging technology of atmospheric water generation. These devices, which essentially pull drinking water directly from the humidity in the air, sound like science fiction. Yet they face a practical challenge: energy consumption and inconsistency. A standalone unit is vulnerable. But what if we paired this high-tech extraction with the timeless logic of the Nabataean cistern? The water harvested from the air could be channeled not into a vulnerable surface tank, but into a managed underground aquifer, creating a stable, buffered reserve insulated from daily weather fluctuations. This combination turns a novel gadget into a resilient component of a larger system, mirroring the ancient practice of storing surplus against future scarcity. Similarly, along our coastlines, solar-powered desalination plants offer a tantalizing solution to freshwater shortages. By using the sun's abundant energy to remove salt from seawater, we can create a virtually limitless supply. But instead of piping this expensive, energy-intensive water directly into city networks where it would be used once and lost, the ancient model suggests a wiser path. This newly fresh water could be strategically used to replenish depleted coastal aquifers. This act of deliberate recharge does more than just create a stored supply. It builds a hydraulic barrier against saltwater intrusion, a growing threat as groundwater levels fall. This approach transforms a linear, consumptive process into a circular, restorative one. The desalination plant becomes not just a water factory, but a guardian of the natural underground infrastructure, a concept that would make perfect sense to the hydrologists of ancient Rome or Persia. Yet, the most critical integration is not technological but philosophical. The greatest lesson from the ancients is not the design of their cisterns, but the mindset that guided their use. They viewed water not as a commodity to be bought, sold, and exploited for maximum short-term profit, but as a community-managed trust. This principle of water as a common good, protected by shared social norms and legal structures, is the essential software that must run on our new hardware. Without this cultural shift, the most advanced technology will fail. A smart aquifer monitored by a network of sensors and managed by artificial intelligence for optimal recharge and extraction is a powerful tool. But if that system is governed by laws that allow a powerful few to monopolize the resource, it will only accelerate the tragedy of the commons. The AI can tell us the optimal rate of withdrawal, but it cannot create the social will to abide by those limits. That must come from us, from a renewed collective commitment to stewardship that sees water security as a fundamental right and a shared responsibility. This fusion of old and new points toward a future hydrology that is both dynamic and deeply rooted. It is a vision where data dashboards display the health of our modern Qanats, where satellite imagery helps us identify the best locations for new infiltration basins, and where community water councils use real-time information to make equitable allocation decisions. The tools will be space-age, but the goal will be ancient: to live in balance with the water cycle, to respect the limits of our resources, and to ensure that the life-giving treasure of freshwater is preserved for generations to come. The path forward requires us to be both archaeologists of lost wisdom and engineers of a sustainable future, recognizing that the blueprint for resilience was drawn not on a computer screen, but in the stone and soil of places that learned to thrive against the odds. If we were to distill thousands of years of hydrological wisdom into a set of core commandments, the first and most fundamental would be this: work with gravity, never against it. This principle is the golden thread running through the most successful ancient water systems. The Persian Qanat is the ultimate expression of this idea. By identifying a water source at a higher elevation and then tunneling with a minuscule, precise downward slope, engineers created a system where water literally delivered itself. There were no pumps to break, no fuel to gather, no energy required beyond the initial monumental effort of construction. Once completed, a Qanat became a perpetual motion machine, a silent, flowing gift that operated day and night, year after year for centuries. The Roman aqueducts, while more visible, operated on the exact same principle. Their magnificent arches were not just for show. They were a way to maintain that crucial elevation gradient across valleys, ensuring that water from a distant spring could flow uninterrupted into the heart of a city. This reliance on gravity wasn't just about efficiency. It was about building a system that was inherently sustainable, immune to the energy crises that could cripple a more complex technology. It was a humble acknowledgement of a fundamental force of nature and a decision to make that force an ally. The second principle shifts our focus from transport to absorption. Where the first rule is about moving water wisely, the second is about stopping it in its tracks, not to hold it on the surface, but to persuade it to enter the ground. The ancestral Puebloans were the undisputed masters of this art of infiltration. Their landscape was a carefully engineered sponge. By building countless small check dams across arroyos and constructing agricultural terraces, they were not creating reservoirs, they were creating opportunities. They understood that in a desert, the true reservoir is not a surface lake but the aquifer below. A violent monsoon downpour hitting bare rock or hard-packed soil will simply flash away in a destructive torrent, lost to the canyon bottoms. But by placing a low barrier of stones across a drainage, they forced that water to pause, to pool, and most importantly, to percolate. This slowed-down water had time to seep through the soil, recharging the groundwater table directly beneath their fields. It was a brilliant form of natural banking. They were making deposits into their subterranean savings account, ensuring that the water would be available to the roots of their crops long after the last storm had passed. Once water was captured and stored, the third principle became paramount: defend it from the sun. In arid environments, evaporation is the enemy of longevity. An open body of water is in a constant losing battle with the atmosphere. The Nabataeans' entire strategy at Petra was a masterclass in evaporation prevention. They went to incredible lengths to capture flash floods, but they would have gained nothing if they had simply created open-air ponds. Instead, they carved over 200 cisterns directly into the solid rock, sealing them with waterproof plaster. These were not just storage tanks, they were subterranean fortresses. By placing the water in a cool, dark, enclosed space, they eliminated almost all evaporative loss. This single decision multiplied the effectiveness of their entire system. Water collected during a rare spring storm could remain cool, clean, and abundant throughout the scorching summer and into the following year. This principle of covered storage, whether in a rock-hewn cistern, a plaster-lined trinchera, or a simple lid on a clay pot, was the difference between a short-term supply and a long-term strategic reserve. The fourth principle introduces a crucial concept from risk management: diversification. The Romans, for all their fame for aqueducts, were never foolish enough to put all their eggs in one basket. They understood that a single point of failure could be catastrophic for a city of 1 million people. While the aqueducts were the spectacular, high-capacity arteries of the empire, they were supported by a vast network of quieter, more resilient capillaries, wells, springs, and immense underground cisterns. If an aqueduct was damaged by an earthquake, sabotage, or simply needed repair, the city did not grind to a halt. The public fountains fed by aqueducts might run dry, but the decentralized network of wells and the massive reserves in cisterns like the Piscina Mirabilis near Naples provided a critical backup. This multi-source approach created a deeply resilient system. It wasn't vulnerable to a single disaster. A drought might lower spring flows, but the cisterns held reserves. An enemy might cut an aqueduct, but the local wells remained. This redundancy is a hallmark of any robust system, ancient or modern, and it stands in stark contrast to the vulnerability of civilizations that relied on a single, monolithic water source. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, these ancient engineers operated with a timescale that is almost foreign to us today: the deep time of generations. The construction of a major Qanat or a Roman aqueduct was not a project measured in fiscal years. It was an intergenerational endeavor. The people who began digging the first shaft of a Qanat knew they would likely not live to see water flow from its outlet. They were building for their grandchildren and their grandchildren's grandchildren. This long-term perspective infused every aspect of the work, from the choice of materials to the painstaking precision of the slope. It was an investment in permanence. There was no concept of planned obsolescence. The goal was to create something that would last for 1,000 years. This profound patience reflects a different relationship with the future, one where the well-being of descendants was a direct and sacred responsibility. In our era of quarterly reports and short political cycles, this fifth principle, the courage to plan for the deep future, may be the most challenging and most vital lesson of all. It is the recognition that true water security is not a project but a legacy. The true power of a secure water supply lies not just in the survival it ensures, but in the civilization it makes possible. When a society is freed from the daily, gnawing anxiety of where its next drink will come from, a profound psychological shift occurs. The collective mind moves from a state of reactive survival to one of proactive creation. Imagine the mental energy required for a community constantly on the brink of drought. Every decision is short-term, focused on the next season, the next rain. There is little room for projects that won't yield immediate returns. But when a culture masters its water, as the Nabataeans did with their hidden cisterns, that constant background fear evaporates. This newfound stability creates a psychological buffer, a safety net that allows for the luxury of long-term thinking. It is this shift that lays the groundwork for everything we associate with a flourishing civilization. The planning of a monumental temple that will take 50 years to build, the patronage of artists and philosophers who contribute nothing to immediate survival, the establishment of legal codes and institutions designed to govern future generations. This is the intangible dividend of water security. It buys a society the most precious resource of all, time to think beyond tomorrow. This mindset of abundance, rooted in hydrological confidence, directly fuels cultural and intellectual achievement. Consider the great library of Alexandria, a repository of all the world's knowledge. Its existence was predicated on the agricultural surplus of the Nile Valley, a surplus made reliable by the predictable flooding of the river, which itself was a surface expression of vast, stable groundwater systems. The scholars who gathered there were not worried about their next meal or their next cup of water. That security was provided by the complex society around them. Their minds were liberated to ponder mathematics, astronomy, and philosophy. Similarly, the breathtaking architectural wonders of Petra were not just feats of engineering, they were declarations of confidence. To invest such immense labor in carving elaborate facades into solid rock requires a belief that your society will be there for centuries to come, that the water will continue to flow through the hidden pipes to support the artisans and their patrons. This is the psychology of permanence, a stark contrast to the temporary structures of a nomadic or drought-stricken people. Conversely, the psychological toll of water scarcity can be just as profound, tearing at the very fabric of social trust. When a mega-drought strikes a society without deep reserves, the mindset shifts violently from abundance to brutal scarcity. Cooperation, the very glue that holds complex societies together, can quickly fracture. The shared resource of water becomes a source of conflict. Neighbor turns against neighbor when a well runs dry. Historical records from periods of collapse, like the end of the Akkadian Empire, speak of cities being abandoned due to hostile speech, a likely euphemism for the civil strife that erupts when resources vanish. The social contract, the agreement to follow rules and work for the common good, dissolves when survival becomes an individual affair. Leadership loses its legitimacy if it cannot provide the most basic necessity. This breakdown is not just a political event, it is a psychological crisis for every individual, forcing a retreat into a smaller, more defensive world focused solely on the self and the immediate family. The great cultural achievements become meaningless when the primary concern is finding a single cup of clean water. The distinction between these two psychological states, abundance versus scarcity, is perhaps the most critical legacy of ancient water management. It shows us that resilience is not merely a physical attribute of infrastructure, but a state of mind. A society with a deep, secure water reserve possesses a form of collective emotional capital. It can weather a bad year or two without panic because its people know the reserves are there. This confidence allows for risk-taking, for exploration, for innovation. It fosters a culture of optimism and expansion. The Phoenicians, master sailors and traders, relied on secure water supplies in their city-states like Tyre and Sidon to provision their long voyages across the Mediterranean. Their maritime empire was built on the psychological certainty that their homeland was secure. This deep-seated sense of security, born from something as simple as a well-maintained Qanat or a full cistern, is the invisible foundation upon which temples are raised, libraries are filled, and human potential is fully realized. It reminds us that the greatest monuments of our past are not just made of stone, but were first conceived in minds that were unburdened by thirst. The challenges we face today with climate change and water scarcity are unprecedented in scale, yet the solutions we so desperately need are not without precedent. The historical record is not merely a collection of interesting stories. It is a vast library of proven strategies, a guidebook written in stone and soil that offers today's policy makers a clear and urgent set of prescriptions. The first and perhaps most critical lesson is a shift in investment strategy. For too long, our approach to water security has been dominated by massive, visible surface projects, enormous dams and reservoirs that lose staggering amounts of water to evaporation. The ancient model urges us to look down, not just out. We must begin treating subsurface storage infrastructure not as a secondary option or an afterthought, but as a primary, frontline defense against drought. This means allocating significant public funding towards modern managed aquifer recharge projects, creating incentives for landowners to establish infiltration basins, and retrofitting our cities to capture stormwater and direct it into the ground rather than flushing it out to sea. This is the modern equivalent of building cisterns beneath a city, creating a hidden insurance policy that is immune to the evaporating power of a warming planet. It's about recognizing that the safest place to store water for the long term is precisely where the Nabataeans and the Puebloans put it, deep within the earth. But infrastructure alone is futile without the governance to manage it wisely. This leads to the second essential policy prescription: the creation of robust, equitable legal frameworks for groundwater. The current situation in many parts of the world is a chaotic free-for-all, a textbook tragedy of the commons where the rule is often simply, whoever has the biggest pump wins. Ancient societies faced this same human tendency and developed sophisticated systems to counter it. The water codes of the Byzantine Empire or the communal agreements that governed a Persian Qanat were designed to ensure that a shared resource remained a benefit for all, not a prize for a few. Modern policy must mirror this communal wisdom by establishing local groundwater sustainability agencies with real authority. These bodies need the power to monitor extraction, set sustainable limits based on scientific recharge rates, and enforce those limits fairly. This involves difficult but necessary conversations about water rights, potentially moving away from absolute ownership models towards a system of allocated shares that prioritizes essential human needs and long-term ecological health over short-term agricultural or industrial gain. The goal is to replace the law of the jungle with the rule of law, creating a system where the collective security of the community is valued above individual profit. The third lesson is about foresight in design, about weaving water conservation directly into the fabric of our urban planning from the very outset. The Nabataeans did not build the city of Petra first and then wonder how to supply it with water. The water system was the very first piece of infrastructure, dictating the city's layout, the placement of its buildings, and the location of its farms. Modern city planners must adopt this same holistic approach, Instead of seeing water management as a utility to be added later, it should be a central pillar of urban design. This means mandating green infrastructure in new developments requiring permeable pavements that allow rainwater to soak into the ground instead of creating runoff, incorporating green roofs and rainwater harvesting systems into building codes, and preserving natural wetlands and floodplains that act as natural sponges. It's about designing cities that function like ecosystems where water is slowed, absorbed, and reused, rather than treated as a waste product to be disposed of as quickly as possible. This proactive integration is infinitely more effective and less costly than trying to retrofit solutions into a sprawling, impervious metropolis decades after it has been built. Perhaps the most overlooked resource in our modern toolkit is the fourth prescription, valuing traditional ecological knowledge. For centuries, indigenous communities around the world have developed an intimate, granular understanding of their local hydrology. The Pueblo peoples of the American Southwest, for instance, possess generations of knowledge about which plants indicate a near-surface water table, how to read the landscape to predict water flow, and which traditional farming techniques best conserve soil moisture. Dismissing this knowledge as primitive or anecdotal is a profound error. It is a data set refined over millennia of direct observation and adaptation. Policymakers should actively seek partnerships with indigenous communities, treating them not as stakeholders to be consulted, but as essential experts and co-designers of water solutions. Their wisdom can provide invaluable insights for restoring degraded watersheds, selecting appropriate crops for a changing climate, and developing community-based management systems that have already stood the test of time. This is not about nostalgia, it is about recognizing a vast and untapped repository of practical, place-based intelligence. Finally and fundamentally, there is the task of cultural transformation. The ancient world understood that protecting water required more than just laws and engineering. It required a deeply held cultural value, a reverence that was often encoded in spirituality and myth. Our modern, disconnected relationship with water, where it magically appears from a tap with no understanding of its source, has eroded that reverence. The fifth policy imperative, therefore, is a massive public education campaign. We need to teach children and adults alike about the hidden world of aquifers, about the slow, precious journey of a drop of rainwater from the sky to the underground reservoir. This education cannot be dry and technical. It must connect people emotionally to their water sources, encouraging them to visit local springs, understand the watershed they live in, and appreciate the true cost of wasting this vital resource. By fostering a culture of conservation that mirrors the sacred respect of ancient times, we create a population that is not just compliant with water restrictions, but is actively invested in preservation. This grassroots shift in values is the ultimate safeguard, the social will that empowers and sustains all the other policies. The enduring power of these ancient ideas lies in their holistic nature. They combine technical ingenuity with social cohesion and cultural wisdom, offering us a timeless blueprint for building a society that can not only survive but thrive in an increasingly thirsty world. For all the incredible secrets we have already wrested from the past, the map of ancient water management is still filled with vast, blank spaces marked only by tantalizing question marks. Our understanding, as sophisticated as it has become, is based overwhelmingly on what has survived the stone-lined Qanats, the rock-hewn cisterns, the canals etched into durable landscapes. But what about the civilizations that flourished in environments where their greatest works were made of more perishable materials, or lie hidden beneath centuries of jungle growth or shifting desert sands? These are the ghost systems, the hydrological secrets that have vanished from sight but not from possibility, and their potential discovery promises to revolutionize our narrative of human adaptation. Consider the Sahara Desert. Today it is a vast ocean of sand, but we know that it was not always so. Just a few thousand years ago, it was a greener, wetter place, home to rivers, lakes, and human settlements. We have evidence of these lost societies from rock art depicting giraffes and elephants, creatures that could never survive in the current arid hellscape. But where are their cities? Where is the evidence of how they managed water as the climate began to change, as the lakes dried up and the grasslands turned to dust? It is not unreasonable to speculate that beneath the dunes of the Sahara could lie the remains of sophisticated water capture systems. Perhaps there are vast, buried cisterns, larger than anything found at Petra, designed to store water from long-vanished rivers. Maybe there are networks of underground channels similar to Qanats that tapped into fossil aquifers, allowing communities to cling to life long after the surface world had become uninhabitable. The sheer scale of the Sahara means that these potential discoveries could represent an entire chapter of hydrological history, a story of resilience in the face of desertification that could hold powerful parallels for our own time. Then there is the Amazon rainforest, a place that has long been thought of as a pristine wilderness, largely untouched by complex human societies. This view is rapidly changing. Recent archaeological discoveries, aided by satellite technology that can see through the forest canopy, have revealed the outlines of vast ancient settlements, complete with roads, plazas, and complex earthworks. This was not a virgin forest, but a managed, almost engineered landscape, home to millions of people before European contact. If they could reshape the land on such a grand scale, how did they manage their water? The Amazon presents a unique hydrological challenge: intense seasonal rainfall followed by periods of flood and drought. The idea that these cultures relied solely on the mighty river itself seems increasingly simplistic. Did they create sophisticated systems of raised fields and canals that not only drained excess water, but also channeled it into artificial wetlands or underground storage to see them through the dry season? Could they have enhanced natural springs or created their own versions of the cenotes found in the Maya world? The organic nature of their infrastructure, likely built with wood, earth, and living plants, means it would have decayed quickly, leaving behind only subtle traces in the soil. Unearthing these traces could reveal a completely different model of water management, one based on integration with a living ecosystem rather than domination of the geology. Perhaps the most enigmatic potential lies at sites like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, a structure that radically rewrote the timeline of human civilization. This monumental complex of carved stone pillars, arranged in great circles, was built by hunter-gatherers over 11,000 years ago, long before the advent of agriculture or permanent settlement. Why would nomadic people invest such staggering effort in a single location? The prevailing theories focus on its role as a ritual or social center, but could water have been the key? The site is situated in a region that, while more fertile then than now, would still have faced seasonal water shortages. Is it possible that the very first spark of monumentality was not driven by religion alone, but by the practical need to manage a scarce resource? The sophisticated stonework at Göbekli Tepe suggests a level of organization previously thought impossible for its time. What if that organization was initially forged around the construction and maintenance of a shared water source, a sacred spring, a deep well, or an elaborate cistern that made the site a reliable gathering point in an otherwise uncertain landscape? The hydrological purpose may have been the practical foundation upon which the spiritual significance was later built. Finding evidence of water management at Göbekli Tepe would force us to reconsider the very origins of civilization, suggesting that the control of water may have been the catalyst for social complexity, not merely a consequence of it. These unanswered questions are far from being mere academic curiosities. They are the engines that drive exploration forward. Each potential discovery carries the power to fundamentally reshape our understanding of human ingenuity. A lost Saharan cistern could show us a new model for surviving extreme desertification. An Amazonian water garden could teach us about sustainable integration with a rainforest environment. A hydrological purpose for Göbekli Tepe could redefine the relationship between resource management and the birth of culture. The tools to find these answers are better than ever before. Ground-penetrating radar can map subsurface features without a single shovel touching the ground. LiDAR technology can strip away the jungle canopy to reveal the ghostly outlines of ancient landscapes. Chemical analysis of soils can detect the faint residues of long-vanished ponds or canals. The past is not done speaking to us. Its most profound lessons about survival, about working with the environment, and about the collective power of human cooperation may still be buried, waiting for the right combination of technology, intuition, and luck to bring them back into the light. These mysteries are a humbling reminder that for every question we answer about the ancient world, two more seem to emerge from the shadows, challenging our assumptions and inviting us to keep digging, both literally and figuratively, for the truth still hidden beneath our feet. The story of these underground reservoirs is far more than a historical curiosity. It is a profound testament to the power of human ingenuity when faced with one of nature's most unforgiving challenges. From the silent, gravity-fed Qanats of Persia, which turned mountain springs into desert lifelines, to the sacred cenotes of the Maya, which served as portals to the underworld and practical wells in a land without rivers, these ancient civilizations grasped a fundamental truth. Their survival in a harsh and unpredictable world depended on a willingness to look beneath the surface, not just in a literal sense, but metaphorically as well. They understood that the most immediate solution, the river, the lake, the rainfall, was often the most fickle. True security required a deeper vision, an ability to perceive and harness the slow, hidden rhythms of the earth itself. What these forgotten hydrological masters teach us is that resilience is not achieved through brute force domination of the natural world. It is not about building ever higher dams to command a river or exhausting an aquifer with powerful pumps. Instead, their legacy is one of intelligent collaboration. They learned to work with nature's cycles, not against them. They captured the violent energy of a flash flood and patiently guided it into safe, subterranean storage. They designed their entire landscapes to act as sponges, maximizing infiltration to recharge the very groundwater they depended upon. This was a philosophy of patience and foresight, a recognition that the most powerful forces are often the quietest and most deeply embedded. As we confront our own era of accelerating climate uncertainty and growing water scarcity, the blueprint these ancient societies left behind has never been more relevant. Their methods offer a powerful alternative to our modern, often reactive, approach to water management. In a world where many regions are depleting their groundwater reserves at an alarming rate, the ancient principle of managed aquifer recharge, the deliberate act of putting water back into the ground, is being rediscovered as a vital strategy for the 21st century. The message from the past is clear and urgent. Long-term security does not lie solely in the vast, visible reservoirs we build on the surface, which are vulnerable to evaporation and contamination. True resilience is found in what we wisely preserve out of sight, in the natural vaults of the earth, insulated from the sun and protected for future generations. The legacy of these water warriors is therefore a direct challenge to us. It is a challenge to shift our perspective from short-term extraction to long-term stewardship. It calls on us to value our most essential resource with the same foresight and reverence that guided the builders of Petra and the farmers of Choco Canyon. This means investing in the intelligent replenishment of our aquifers, developing fair and sustainable systems for managing shared groundwater, and fostering a cultural ethos that views water as a sacred trust rather than a mere commodity. Their stories remind us that the greatest civilizations were not necessarily those with the most gold, but those who mastered the art of securing the true source of all life. If the ingenuity of these ancient engineers has inspired you, we would love to hear your thoughts. Share this video with someone who would find it fascinating, and let us know in the comments below which of these incredible ancient water innovations